Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Sharper Skills in 30 Minutes, Mastering Organizational Settings and Tips and Tricks, brought to you today by the Urban Footprint Customer Success Team. In a bit of a reversal, I'm Nathan Stone, and joining me today is our Head of Customer Success, Andy Federer. Our Sharper Skills webinars are designed to highlight new features, showcase tips and tricks, and help you make the best use of the Urban Footprint platform. In this webinar, Urban Footprint's customer success team will review organizational settings in Urban Footprint. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a few of our favorite tips and tricks to help you get the most out of Urban Footprint. Before turning things over to Andy, I would like to remind you that you can ask questions using both the chat or the Q&A feature in Zoom. As the webinar is relatively short, we'll save questions until the end of the webinar. I'd also like to remind you that our next webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, August 26th, and we'll introduce a new feature called Painting by Attribute. This new feature gives you the power and flexibility to override and directly specify residential and employment density attributes of Urban Footprint building and place types. So it allows you to engage in greater customizability. You can find a link to that to register for that webinar in our most recent newsletter in your inbox. And with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Andy.
Thank you, Nathan, and great to be the one behind the driver's wheel here for a webinar. So let's get started. Before we get into Urban Footprint, let's review our agenda. We'll do a little bit of slideware where we will review the user roles in Urban Footprint. Then we'll dig right into all of the organizational settings that you have access to in the software. And then we'll round it out with a few tips and tricks that will hopefully make your use of Urban Footprint a little bit easier. Please ask questions as we go through the chat and Q&A. As Nathan mentioned, we will save those for the end. So let's take a look at the owner role. So the owner role is the role with the most control over your account. So using this role, you can view, edit, and create projects and layers, delete projects, manage members, manage all of your organization's settings, and manage your billing information outside Urban Footprint. Like all roles in Urban Footprint, more than one user can be assigned to the role. So if you want more than one person in your organization with the owner rights, you can certainly do that. Moving on, we have the admin role. This is similar to the owner role, except that anyone in the admin role cannot manage the billing details. So you have all the same rights and privileges as owner except for billing, which means that you get to view, edit, and create projects and layers, delete projects, manage members, and manage your organization's settings. The editor role should be assigned to users who do not need to create projects on their own and will just be performing work on existing projects. So with the editor role, you can view and edit projects and layers. And then rounding out our role hierarchy, the viewer role has the least privileges of all the roles. And as its name implies, users in this role can only view projects and cannot edit projects or layers. So we're about to jump into Urban Footprint to get hands-on with organizational settings. But before we do that, let me preview the tips and tricks we'll be covering. The first tips will be about how you can get self-service help. We have a lot of great content that can jumpstart your understanding of how to use Urban Footprint on your projects. The next few tips will help you get your projects started. I'll show you how to create neighborhood scale projects and use buffering to create a corridor project. Plus I have one other tip that I will show you along the way. So let me, at this point, switch into Urban Footprint. Okay, I assume everyone can see my screen here. So if you cannot, Nathan, please let me know. let's start with where you can access your organization's settings. You'll see a person icon up here in the upper right corner. When you click on it, you'll see your username plus the organizations to which you have access. So here you see my name, and you see the organizations that I have access to. I have access to these 4 organizations. Each one of them is treated separately. So this is because UrbanFootprint provides a sort of easy collaboration between teams. So if you're an organization that does a lot of work with clients, feel free to talk to us about how you can invite them into UrbanFootprint so they can collaborate with you. Or if you're just a large organization and you want to break your use of UrbanFootprint into smaller teams, that's also something we can accommodate. But to get started, let's just click on my name. And this is going to bring up my profile in the software. So this profile page contains information on your account, including your email address, your first and last names, and the organizations that you are a member of. The information on this screen is not editable. If you have owner or admin role for any of the organizations shown, you'll see a gear over here in the rightmost column of the table that you can select to move into the settings for that organization. So let's do that, but instead of selecting the gear here, I'll go back up to our person icon and select the UrbanFootprint sales organization. So let's take a look at some of the things that you can do here. First action you can do is change the name of your organization. So if you need to edit that, you would click edit and simply update the name of your organization. I'm not actually going to do that here, so I will click cancel. You can also see your subscription information, the billing period, total seats, number of used seats. As this information is not editable within UrbanFootprint, you'll need to reach out to your success manager if you have any questions on that, or if you'd like to make a change. Now let's take a look at the members page. The first thing you'll notice is that you can add members to your account. There's this little button here. To do that, just select that, and it will open a dialog that will prompt you for information on the person you would like to add to your organization. So you enter in their email address, their name, choose the role that we talked about earlier that best fits their use of UrbanFootprint. And after you've entered all of that, you'd be able to click save, which will trigger an invitation to be sent to the email address that you provided. So once you've done that, the person that you invite will need to complete their enrollment within 14 days. If they don't do that, you would need to resend them an invitation. Let's take a look what else you can do on this members page. So the members table that we're looking at here lists all of the users in your organization. You can see their name, their email address, and the role in their organization. You'll notice that there are 2 icons on the right of this table. The first icon allows you to edit a user, and the second will enable you to delete a user. So let's take a look at that. So if we want to edit a user, we can go in and click edit, and you'll get to do things like change their email address or reassign them a role if you need to add or remove certain privileges for that person. And I'm not going to make a change here, so I will click cancel. And then you can remove people from your organization. So if you want to remove someone, you can click the trash can icon. If you want to confirm that, just click remove. Otherwise, click cancel. Now let's take a look at the projects page and how you can manage your organization's projects. First thing that you can do here is create a project from this page. We'll actually touch on creating projects in our tips and tricks, so we're not going to go into details here, but it's going to be the same basic process that you use anywhere in UrbanFootprint to create a project. The projects table lists all of the projects in your organization. Here you can see that there are 503 projects in this organization, so we have a lot of work saved up here. You can sort each of the columns in the table to organize your information. For example, if you want to display projects by the date they were created, you can do that by selecting Created. So here we're seeing sort by first created, and we can swap the sort order to show projects that were most recently created. So it's not necessarily apparent that you can sort by these, but you can. So just click on the column that you would like to sort by, and you'll be able to do that. You can also edit the metadata for a project by selecting the edit icon here. Again, these are icons to the rightmost columns in the table. You can select edit. You can change the name of the project and the project's description. We're not going to make any changes there, so we'll click cancel. And similarly, you can delete a project. So if you want to remove a project from your organization, you can click the trash can icon and confirm it if you would like to remove that from your organization. So that concludes our review of organizational settings. Please queue up any questions you have in the chat, and we'll get to those later on. Now let's move on to our first tip, getting help. There are two places in UrbanFootprint that you need to be aware of to get help from us. The first is up here in our top bar. This menu option here, click on the question mark icon, will provide you with references to a few significant resources that I would strongly recommend you review, even if you've been using UrbanFootprint for a while now. Let's take a look at those. The Getting Started Guide gives you a solid foundation for the terminology you'll encounter when using UrbanFootprint and will quickly orient you to UrbanFootprint's user interface. The How UrbanFootprint Works link links to the software's online help. If you need to know how to do something in the software, our help is a solid starting point for any of your questions. We recently rewrote all of our help to bring it up to date with the more modern look and feel in some parts of the application, and made some clarifications to things. So if you haven't checked that out in a while, I recommend you go take a look at that. The analysis module methodology links to all of our methodology documentation for the analytics in UrbanFootprint. Here you'll find how the analytics work, including their inputs, transformations, and outputs for each of the analytic models. And the documentation also covers any of the parameters or settings you can adjust within the analytic. The tutorials link takes you to some walkthroughs showing how to use UrbanFootprint to solve specific planning problems. These are detailed guides that show you how to accomplish your goals in a step-by-step manner. And we have tutorials covering using UrbanFootprint for things like project proposals, existing conditions assessments, scenario planning, reporting. So check those out, get some ideas on using UrbanFootprint, and then always feel free to circle back and work with your success manager for our paired planning sessions, where we'll work specifically on the projects that you are using UrbanFootprint on. We also have tutorials that are specific to COVID-19. We'll look at the COVID-19 data that's available in UrbanFootprint, and also using UrbanFootprint for COVID-19 recovery. So the next tip here, tip number 2, is about our online chat. Many of you may already be using this to talk with our support team or your success manager, but regardless of your experience with it, let's take a look at what is all in here. To launch chat, just select the chat icon in the lower left corner of the Urban Footprint app. First, you'll see a list of the recent conversations that you've had with us. So you can click see all of your conversations. Here you'll see not only the announcements that I or our product team makes, but all of the chats that you would have with your success manager. So here you'll see that I have chat history going back, looks like a little bit over 3 years at this point. So lots of fond memories of chatting with the team there. But that also gives you a way to keep track of all the different conversations you're having, so you can go back and make sure that you're clear on how to do certain things. You can start a new conversation, just click send us a message. So we'll do that and see if we hear back from our support team. So we'll wait patiently for that. The last thing I want to point out here is some additional references to materials in Urban Footprint. The first two are ones we've already discussed, our online help and tutorials. But the third one here, we haven't. This is our FAQ, and it's just that. It's a set of frequently asked questions that we've put together based on questions we've received over the years. So oftentimes, as our support and success team is working with customers, we'll decide that we've heard common request come in from a few different people. We'll add that to our FAQ. So let's actually take a look at the content there. So here you'll see our frequently asked questions. We've organized that into a couple categories, and we actually have some organization management FAQs. So we're not going to go into there right now, but just a little preview of the content that is there. So that wraps up the tips around our online help and working with our support and success teams to get your questions answered. Now let's take a look at the ways that you can start a project that is working at a scale that is different from a city or a region. So the first thing we're going to look at is creating a project based on a neighborhood boundary. So the first thing we do is actually get back to our map here and the main Urban Footprint interface. So if you want to create a project with a boundary that is not a city or any one of our named places, you can do that. That's pretty straightforward. You start by clicking the Create Project dialog here. So if you already have a boundary that you'd like to work with, you can just dive right in and upload that. But if you don't, one place to start, if you're working at the neighborhood scale, is we have a layer that contains neighborhoods. So you can simply search for our neighborhood boundary layer. You can add that into Urban Footprint. You'll see that that's now a layer that's visible here. We can bring that up and you'll see that we have all of our layers right in here, all the different neighborhoods in San Francisco. So I've already selected the Pacific Heights neighborhood. So if I want to create a project based on any of the neighborhoods in San Francisco, I could select individual neighborhoods. I could make a multi-select if I wanted to work with more than one neighborhood. But the next step, once you've made a selection here, is just to save as. We'll save this as the Pacific Heights neighborhood boundary. We'll click OK. And that's going to create a new layer here in your layer list. We can highlight that as well. So you see that this is now a boundary, a polygon in case that can be used. So what's the next step? You can then download this layer as a shapefile. We'll click the button there. We'll start the download process, and then you can use that as a custom shape. So when we go back to create our project, we can upload that as a polygon boundary. We'll take our Pacific Heights polygon here. We'll click that. You would enter in all of the basic information you have for your project, and then click the Create Project button. We're not actually going to do that here because creating a project takes a little bit of time, and I don't want to take us out of our flow, so we will do the baked cake version of this and go to our Pacific Heights project. So we have our neighborhood scale project. One thing you may notice here is that due to the way the neighborhood boundary is defined and the parcel geometries are defined for San Francisco, we've actually picked up a big park here. That's not necessarily part of the neighborhood, and we don't want to include that in our analysis. So let's take a look at how we can remove that. So we go to our point selector. We can select that park. We can go into the edit menu for the base canvas and remove that feature. So you get a little bit of a warning about this, saying that the feature is going to be removed not only from the base canvas, but any scenarios that you may have already created or will create. But let's just go ahead and do that because we don't want that to be part of our analysis. So it's really as simple as that. We created a neighborhood project using a boundary file, or neighborhood boundary. We downloaded that, re-uploaded it, made an edit to the base map, and that brings us to our last tip, where we're going to create a project area based on a buffer around a bus route. So to get started here, let's go back to our San Francisco project and take a look at that. So since we're going to be doing something a little bit different, we'll clean things up. We'll delete the layer that we created, and we'll remove our neighborhood boundary from our layer list, but we also need to go back in and add a layer. So we'll pull that up. We'll pull up our transit line. There we go. Click close, and now we have our public transit line layer. So we'll kind of zoom in here because there's a specific set of transit lines that I'm interested in using. And to help kind of narrow things down, I'll bring up our data table. We'll turn on our point selector again because we want to work on finding the specific line we want to use. We'll select that, and here you'll see that we've selected the 41 and 45 lines in San Francisco. We can apply a buffer to those. In this case, we'll do a 250 meter buffer around that, and we will then click Save As to give us the boundary that we want to use for our project. And we can confirm that boundary. We can highlight that layer. We can edit our symbology to make that a little easier to see. We'll just make that line a little bit thicker. We'll make that a little darker. We'll bring it up to the top. And now that becomes a little bit more visible. So now we have that buffer around the area that transit line operates in. So we'll save that. Go back here. And then just like we did for the neighborhood boundary, we would download this layer and then re-upload that as a project. And we will, instead of actually doing that, again, we'll show the baked cake version of that project. And voila, you have a buffered area around those two bus routes in San Francisco. And I think that pretty much brings us to the Q&A section for the webinar. So Nathan, what questions do we have?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. We do have a few questions here. One relates to is there a way to see which projects my team is working on or other activity that's happening with collaboration?
Yeah, so we can go back into the collaboration uh, spaces here within our organization. So you can view the projects that have been created, but at this point there is not a way to see like which ones have been worked on recently within the app. If that's information you're interested in, you should contact your success manager, and they can do a little bit of work behind the scenes to generate that information.
Okay, great. And then you were working with neighborhood layers, and there's a question coming in. Obviously, that Zillow layers is helpful, but oftentimes cities have their own unique planning boundaries or neighborhood layers that are kind of subscribed to by locals using planning efforts. And so, can we upload our own neighborhood layers?
Of course, yeah. So if you have a neighborhood boundary or really any project boundary that is created outside of Urban Footprint, you could maybe get it from the city's data portal, or it could be something that you've just generated outside of the software. You can always upload that into an existing project if you just want to make sure the context is appropriate and is going to serve the needs for your project. But just like I uploaded boundary files that I exported from Urban Footprint. If you, as long as you have a geospatial file that is a sort of polygon, you can use that as a project boundary. And here you'll see the formats that we support. So if you have GeoJSON, GeoPackage, or a zipped shape file, you're able to use that to start a project.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. So we talked a little bit about the parcels that you can remove or delete from a project if there was an overselection. If we change our mind and we want to add that back in, is there a way to undo that action?
Yeah, let's take a look at how that would work. So here in our base canvas, we still have this big park. We can go in, we can select that park, we can remove it. So you'll see the Urban Footprint is applying that change, and then you can undo what you've removed. So if for whatever reason you need to add something back in, you would just click the undo remove button, and now that's available for you to use.
Well, that seems simple enough. What if there's multiple actions that you've made? How does that work?
Like multiple features that have been deleted.
Yes.
Yeah, so to think of this as like we'll save the history of events that you've done to modify your canvas, whether it's removing features or making paint edits. And again, a plug for our upcoming webinar on paint by attribute. Please subscribe to that one, and see you in 2 weeks. But yeah, so if you've made multiple changes, you can you can just click undo to get back to the state that you want.
Okay, great. Sounds like it keeps that history there. Looks like we have two more questions. So typical buffer sizes. You obviously have created some buffers on transit lines there, but what is a recommended type of buffer in terms of distance from different types of layers like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know the default answer I'd have is it sort of depends on the context, the size of the project as a whole, and sort of the level of detail that you're looking for the analysis to be run in. But typically, anything from a quarter mile, half mile, full mile, eighth of a mile is sort of a good starting point to work from. And then based on, again, the needs of your project, you can sort of tune that over time to get you the fidelity of the analytics and tune it to the sensitivity for the analysis you're looking to do.
That makes sense. Yeah, it seems pretty customizable, and really you can set it to any measurement that you need for
Yeah.
That's good to know. Maybe one more quick clarification. There's a question around how licenses or number of users interact with multiple users of the platform, and kind of how that sits around access to files. So if someone uploads a file to a project and makes some changes, how all that interacts together.
Sure. So if I think what I'm hearing is, not sure I'm understanding the question correctly, but it seems like those are sort of two orthogonal issues, where if you have users who are working within a project and you want to upload layers or do work within a project, really anyone in your organization has access to view or make changes to that project, I guess, depending on the role that they are assigned to. But if you have kind of clarifications on that, I'm happy to maybe take that offline, since we are a little bit over our time limit.
Yeah, I think that starts to really answer that question. We can certainly get some more details on that as well from our Q&A questioner. That sounds great. Thanks for answering those for us.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you again, everyone who is online here. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, and look forward to seeing you all on our next webinar. Thank you.